So, imagine it's late one night. You're chilling out in your room and watching cartoons and drawing, and you get a message from your friend on Discord. Only it's not your friend, but your friend's neighbor. And not only that, but it's your friend's neighbor saying he's kidnapped your friend. Because your friend is Hanzo Shimada from Overwatch, and he is Genji. If you've ever found yourself in this situation, no the fuck you haven't, because I refuse to believe that anyone other than me gets put in situations like this. Hey ya ho ya out there to all my big brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, and of course, mommies and daddies. I'm Mark, and I want to talk about a weird situation I found myself in a few years ago that's kind of scarred me to this day. We're going to be talking about the time my friend pretended to get held hostage in his own home just so that he could get some affection points from me. So I think it's probably a smart idea to start with some backstory to all this. Back in 2017, when I was around 19 years old and during the Overwatch hype craze, I joined a Discord server for fans of the game. The server was mostly a sort of communal hangout server, but it also had a lot of Overwatch kinnies in it. And for anyone who doesn't know what I mean when I talk about kin or kinny or kinning, a basic description is that it's someone who relates to a character or thing like a dragon or a fairy or an elf or whatever so much that they say, I am this thing, I am this character. That's a very surface level explanation, and I am never gonna go down that rabbit hole to explain better because, to be honest, I don't fully understand it myself. In any case, be it good or bad, I wound up fitting in just fine with everyone because of my adamant love of McCree. I mean, I already live on a farm and wear cowboy boots and cowboy hats almost every day, and that rugged handsomeness he has is just mwah, chef kiss. People in the server, either because they were a kinny or just a big fan, roleplayed a lot as their faves. And I'm also not opposed to the occasional RP, so I joined in too. This is where Hanzo comes into the picture. He joined the server and immediately he and I hit it off. We just became fast friends, and it was like to the point where we'd have little chit-chat role plays every day and talk to each other in character, and I thought it was a lot of fun. Han was, of course, a Hanzo kinny. And after about a week of role-playing with each other, he told me that he thought I was his canon mate, which is like kinny talk for the one, keep that in mind for later, someone that shares your specific version of a character's story or timeline or whatever. I was pretty uneasy about it because I was still iffy on the whole, McCree kin thing. But, I mean, I liked role-playing with him, and I enjoyed talking, so I never outright denied it. After a while of speaking to Hanzo, though, things got progressively weirder. Mostly because of weird things he would say or do. Like, do you remember being 11 years old and not having many friends, so you just make up whack-ass shit to try and impress people my dad works at Nintendo style? Well, keep that in mind as we're moving forward. I'd also like you to keep in mind that everything I'm about to say happened in the span of, one singular month in the summer. So the first thing that kinda stuck out to me as out of the ordinary and just not right was the first time I ever got into a voice call with him. I don't usually feel comfortable getting in calls with people I don't know super well because I'm, self-conscious about my speaking voice. But I thought, hey, let's take a chance. This guy's been a pretty good friend so far, so I'm sure nothing bad will happen. This isn't exactly the first time I'll wind up eating my words during this series of events, but it is the start of an entire snowball of stupidity. When we first got on call, everything was going great. We're just chatting and hanging out and having a great time. Until he got a call on his phone. You see, Hanzo thus far has told me and the rest of the server that he's a lawyer at one of the top firms in London, which, by the by, I also thought was a little weird because he said he was only like 24, and I've known lawyers, and I know all the time it takes to get through studying, and passing tests and shit. But I also remember back in college, I made friends with this girl who started when she was like 13, so I assumed that could be it. Again, it was nothing too out of the ordinary or out of the blue to be real. But when he answered the phone, he just started talking to someone who was apparently his client. He didn't hang up, he didn't tell me he'd be back, he just started talking to this client about, and I'm not exaggerating here, 30 some odd misdemeanor charges he had apparently confessed to Hanzo about doing. And again, I'm not a lawyer. And I've never studied law either, but I was under the impression that if your client confessed to you about doing these things, you weren't really supposed to keep trying to defend them as entirely innocent, which is what it sounded like from as the call was going. At the very least, I was super uncomfortable listening in on this one-sided conversation that was at least a breach of confidentiality, and at most, probably illegal? So I leave the call, and he immediately messages me and apologizes for the interruption, but says he's done with the call, which is like, okay, Wig, I don't feel comfortable getting back in call right now, so instead we just end up talking. And already, because of this one interaction, I'm starting to feel kinda hella sus about him because, let's be real, no lawyer in their right mind would do something like that. But also I'm like, well, whatever, it's not all that important. It's a little weird that he'd pretend to have a conversation with a client, but maybe he just wanted to seem cool in front of me. I try to put it out of my head, assuming, albeit incorrectly, that this would be the last of the weirdness with him. But because I'm a Dumbo clod who refuses to see flags for their crimson hue, this was only the beginning. Later that week, Hanzo messages me, full-on cry-typing, to ask if I was comfortable with him venting to me. I say yes, and I ask what's wrong, and he tells me that his mother was just diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I know from personal familial experience that pancreatic cancer is horrible. My grandmother was incredibly lucky to have it found early enough to be treated, but from what Hanzo told me, his mother was a bit far along. Now, I am never one to doubt someone's medical experience or troubles. It's not my place, and it's not my business. However, in this case, it wound up adding on more to the suspicious feeling I had about Hanzo, because the day after he told me that she was diagnosed and going to start chemotherapy, he tells me that she's been put on life support. And then, one day later, he comes to me cry-typing and saying that his mother pulled her own life support. I'll let you think about that for one moment, just to feel through how redonk it is. I, of course, can't say to him, "You are lying. That didn't happen." Because a big part of my brain was like, but what if it did happen? What if this Hanzo Kenny, who just told me the other day that his client he talked to on the phone while we were in call, threw a nail-filled plank of wood at his door, and who said that his mother is now dead of her own life support pulling hands, actually just lives the most unfortunate and exciting life ever? So, instead, I give him my condolences and try to just be there for him if he needs me. Don't worry though, dear listener, because he rebounded super fast in the next few days. This is when he introduced me to May. We'd been talking every day for the first couple weeks we knew each other, but I'd been slowly pulling back a bit and taking longer to respond after the whole lawyer thing. And even though I responded to him faster after his mother's death, I think he was already getting the idea that I wasn't all that trusting and was actually a little weary of him by now. May, he told me, was his canon mate May, and so that meant she was absolutely my canon mate May, and we should be close friends. I was still pretty uneasy about the whole canon mate thing, but I also didn't want to upset him right after his mom allegedly died. Maybe it was just because of 3 weird things happening to make me untrusting of anything Han did. But I was a little suspect of her from the start. You see, May was, allegedly, an environmental studies student from and going to school in Beijing, China. That alone is a little too on the nose for also being kin with May Overwatch, but even more iffy was that she never typed at the same time as Hanzo in our group chat. They never let me call with them, even though they said that they had called together and that they wanted me to get closer to her. And most of all, that she was somehow always on at the same time as Hanzo, which, looking back, it seems more like a California time zone than a London one, but who fucking cares at this point? Additionally, looking back, they also had almost the exact same style of typing. I was going into this assuming that May was a sock puppet account, but also not sure enough to call it out because what if this is just a big series of coincidences? See, this is what shows you how stupid and trusting I am, because I'll let people think that they can play me like a fiddle, when in reality, I'm just not confident enough to call them out on their tomfuckery. Well, I used to be anyways. The next events are actually the main driving factors in why I don't take shit and drop people very fast if I find out that they've lied to me. About a week later, Hanzo tells me about some troubles he's had with his neighbor. He told me that it started with his neighbor somehow finding out about the fan server and asking about kinning one day, informing Han that he canned Genji the day after that, and then finally physically assaulting Hanzo and trying to drag him into his car because he, as Genji, was upset at Hanzo the day after that. Think about that. In the span of 3 fucking days, this human person, allegedly, went from not knowing about kin to being willing to commit a crime over kin. Okay. I may be averse to confrontation, but I am no moron. This is the fakest shit I have ever heard in my life. But at this point, I don't want to confront Hanzo about it. At this point, I'm like, yeah, he's a liar, but if he's this much of a liar, I do not want him lying about me to others in the server if I tell him to fuck out of here with that nonsense. I think he probably picked up on my flat attitude about it because he left the topic for a couple of days. But then, we get to the night of the fucking. The day before all of this goes down, May tells Hanzo and I that she's going to be going on a vacation around Europe with her family. She and Hanzo make plans to meet up because it's incredibly easy to make fake plans with a fake person, and they go on their merry way. But we get to that night, and I'm in my room, chilling out, making some doodles and watching some anime, and I get a message on Discord, and it's Hanzo, saying, "Help." I respond by asking what's wrong. And then I get another message saying, "Hey, is this Jesse?" And I, very tired already at this being like 10:36 p.m., am like, sure, what's going on? Is everything okay? And this motherfucker, this absolute Chad, responds, "I hope not." Because you see, my little Shawnsters, this totally wasn't Hanzo messaging me, but instead, his neighbor Genji Kinney, who proceeds to monologue to me about how he's done with him because he acts like he's trying to redeem himself, but just hasn't changed. Because you know, he, the neighbor, as Genji Shimada, is angry because in canon of the video game Overwatch, Hanzo Shimada, his brother, killed him. Because that's something that real people have to deal with. And all the while, I'm like, this is the most whack-ass shit I have ever seen in my life. But instead of blocking him like a smart person, I'm like, you know what? I'll play along with this. It's Sunday night, and I'm like actually low-key a little bit worried about what he's gonna do to himself, so I decide to just go along with this until he gets tired or something. I say that he needs to chill out, and that he's acting like a goddamn idiot, and this Shakespearean bastard tells me that Hanzo needs to know that there are consequences to his actions. You know, the actions that were done in fictional video game land written by the creative team over at Blizzard. And so I'm like, there's a difference between real life and your shitty canon, dude. You're acting like an idiot. And he goes on to try and make some shit up about how suddenly I'm also his canon McCree, and that he's still in Hanzo's house, and that he has the guy tied up. And then he dead of ass says, BRB, checking on him. And I'm like, okay, this isn't funny anymore, because I am tired. Physically and emotionally. I did not sign up for the trauma of having a friend fake kidnap himself, and still on some level, like a goddamn idiot, worrying about like, but what if this actually is a real thing that's happening, and there is a Kinney serial killer in his house, and for some dumb shit reason, he decided to message me on Discord about it. I think to myself, May's over in his area right now, even though I'm like 99% sure she's not real. So, how about this? I'll message May telling her what's going on, since she supposedly has his address for her meetup. I'll send screenshots of what's going on, and I'll tell her to call the cops. I figure that 1, if she answers, Hanzo is definitely not in any real danger. And 2, if the guy leaves before the cops show up, then it was definitely staged. So I do that. May says she calls the cops, and lo and behold, the next message I get from Hanzo's Discord account is Hanzo asking me if I'm there, and then saying, he is gone. And I'm like, okay, so that was all a lie then. And I say, what happened? And this goddamn mad lad responds back in cry type, I do not want to trigger you. And I'm like, listen, pal, we are well past that. So I listened to him tell me about how the crazy fictionkin neighbor broke in and tied him up, kicked and spat on him, and then got weirdly intimate on him, which makes me actually incredibly uncomfortable, but who cares? He did say he didn't want to trigger me, so I guess there's that at least. He already made up a whole ass neighbor to kidnap him in his own home. Why not actually make the situation weird and, in the context of what's happening, kind of incesty? Like, I'm saying this like I was a cool fucking cucumber, but fellas, when this was happening, I was actually really close to a panic attack, because all I knew was that my friend might be in danger. But like, whatever, I have trauma, moving on. Hanzo asks if he can call, and I say yes. So I pick up on Discord, and I cannot make this shit up when I say that he was doing the worst fake crying I have ever heard. And I could also hear a woman and a little kid who, before he told me were his little sister and niece, just happily chatting in the background. And at this point, I don't give a fuck and say, that's a weird fucking way to be acting if they had somehow just gotten home to find their brother/uncle tied up and battered. And Hanzo doesn't say anything. He just goes quiet and hangs up before saying that the police had arrived and needed to take his statement. So I'm like super fucked up about this all night and into the next day. And with a good night's sleep clarity, I'm like, wait a minute, that was absolutely fucked up for him to do. What the fuck? That's not a prank. So I go to the moderator of the server, tell them what happened, give screenshots, and they very understandably are like, hey, what the fuck? They ask me if I want them to talk to Hanzo or just ban him from the server, and I say no. I'd rather talk to him maybe get some closure since I'm still feeling physically ill after all that happened last night, and then we can talk about banning him from the server. They say okay, so I slide on over into his DMs. Now, this should show you how much of a fucking over-forgiving dullard I used to be. You could punch me in the face and I'd still give you a million chances while telling myself, okay. But if they hurt me one more time, I'm cutting them off. So I go to him and say, hey, I know what happened last night was all fake. I'm not mad, but I'm very upset about it. If you apologize to me for tormenting me emotionally, I will forgive you. But you need to either admit that you're a big liar, or show me the police report from last night as proof, because if you don't, we're done here. And he says to me, straight as a board, you are invalidating the experience I went through, and it is really hurting me. How could you do this to me the day after I got kidnapped in my own home? So with a deep sigh, I decide it's time to bite the bullet and tell him, in this case, I think it's better for me to take the chance on being a huge asshole because it's just all of this is just too unbelievable. I am going to block you. But then his story changes. He says, oh no, none of that happened. Why would you try to gaslight me in this way? Like an absolute mad lad. Because he hasn't deleted any of the messages yet. And the conversation we just had is still right there. I say fuck this. I finally block him before going to the server mod and getting him banned. I get added to the mod team and we make an announcement about this being unacceptable. And in a better timeline, this would be where the story ends. This would be where we were done. This is where I'd say the outro. This is where I'd just say have a scrapdangulous day and be out of here. But because we live in a hell world and I was cursed with a interesting life at birth, this shit continues. About an hour later, we get a message from one of the younger members in the server. This 16-year-old Widowmaker Kenny says, oh, I'm really glad he got kicked out because he'd been asking my McCree Kenny friend, who's 15 years old, for nudes, and I don't know if he actually got them. And we say, what the fuck? And immediately go to message the McCree for more info. And as it turns out, he and Hanzo had become good friends. Such good friends, in fact, that he thought that they were canon mates. Such good friends, in fact, that he thought they were dating. Such good friends, in fact, that he did, allegedly, send Hanzo nudes of his underage self, and that we could fuck straight off to hell because it was none of our business. We get blocked by the kid, but we go ahead and send every bit of evidence and info we have to Discord. But fuck man, like, what do we even do about that? We don't have any of the proof, we don't have any of the messages from Hanzo to this McCree, the Widowmaker Kenny doesn't have it. At this point, it's all just hearsay. So all we have is a crazy fiction kin neighbor story, and a story from another minor saying that he asked for nudes from a different minor, and that minor very staunchly defending him. There's unfortunately no amazing moral or update to this story. No news that he was sent to jail for being a creep, or that it turned out he actually was like 15 himself, since that was a theory a lot of the mod team seem to have. I mean, I guess a takeaway could be that you need to set very strict boundaries and limits for the amount of horseshit you're willing to take. But nothing good came out of that situation. I mean, I guess I met my absolute worst ex-girlfriend through a mutual hatred of him, because ass flash news hole, he was pulling the same fucking nonsense in other Overwatch fan servers too, but I definitely wouldn't call that a good thing to come out of it. Maybe one day I'll make a video on that disaster too. But anyway, that's all I have for this story. With that being said, If you liked the video, or at least pity me and everyone who had to deal with this guy, like the video. Subscribe if you want. You don't have to, but if you do, I'll see you in the next video. I hope you have a scrabdangulous day. Later, skater. I try to put it out of my mind. Why is my mouth so smacky?